Okay, so we're going to continue Hilchos Mikvaot, Siman Reish Aleph. We'll do a whole bunch of Seifim that are pretty much related. Chav Gimel, hopefully all the way till Chav Tes, including Chav Tes, where we're dealing with the change of color of a mikveh, and perhaps not only the color has changed, but the essence of the mikveh is no longer water. It could be consists of something else, and therefore does not qualify as a kosher because it's not real water. Juice, wine, paint, and they're all listed in the Mishnayos and Mikvaot pretty much, where there are certain items, certain liquids that can be mashlim, others that cannot be mashlim, others in other words that can complete the required amount that a mikveh needs to make it kosher. There are those that don't invalidate it, but they're not mashlim, and there are those, of course, that would ruin it, would passel it. But before we get into that, so before we look into the Mechaber, just a quick review of the last halachas. They concerned various kinds of scenarios where you have a mixture of Mayim Shem and Mayim Shuvim, but it would all depend which one came first. In other words, it is possible to start off with Mayim Shuvim and end up with a kosher mikveh. However, in order for that to happen, we said that there's a certain amount that would have had to come out of the mikveh together with the Mayim She'uvim and with the new waters. In other words, there would have to be a proportion. One would have to calculate how much there was before, how much came in of the new waters, but technically it would be possible to kasher this mikveh even though we started off with a lot of Mayim She'uvim. As long as that Mayim She'uvim came out, and it came out, let's just say, in proportion. Proportion meaning not just what was there before, 10 gallons of mashuvim, but until we were certain that there was less than 3 lugim there, which means that we have to figure out how much came in, how much was there, and somehow figure out a proportion between the two of them to determine that we have less than 3 lugim mayim shuvim to begin with. Because otherwise, if you have 3 lugim to begin with, it would be possible even if you put a lot of water in there, that is even more than the 40 se'ah, because you're starting off with 3 lugim, or even if you're not starting off, as we've seen also that if you're missing 3 lugim or she'uvim, also they would ruin the entire good waters that you had before, the rain waters. However, in that case, which there's a separate seif about, where you started off with Mayim She'erim, you don't need to figure out proportions. It would suffice for the entire amount that was there, that was ruined as a result of the 3 lugim or whatever, to just come out, and you would have to have brand new water. Obviously, anytime you have 40 se'ah, anytime you have 40 complete se'ah of Mayim Shem coming in to a bore of Mayim She'uvim, you would immediately render the whole thing kosher. In essence, you could have hashaka of, if you have a mikveh of Mayim She'erim, of 40 se'ah of Mayim She'erim, that is immediately connected to the Mayim She'uvim at once, that would be different than a amasamayim, than a channel coming in little by little where we have to figure out the proportion. In other words, once you have the 40 se'ah or more, but it happens instantaneously, then you pretty much have resolved the whole problem. You have been metahar the bore, in the same way that you could use a mayan to metahar Mayim She'uvim, because the mayan would be metahar fil b'mashahu. So that would be acceptable. And that is what we have pretty much today, where you could have Mayim She'erim connected to Mayim She'uvim, like water's coming from a faucet. But since you have a kosher mikveh to begin with at once, it does not present a problem. But what we're going to soon see now is that sometimes it could be an advantage. It could be a situation where you have an advantage, some sort of advantage, where the gimel lugim she'uvim will not in any way cause any problems. That's going to be very interesting. In other words, even though ordinarily when you don't have a kosher mikveh, you may have a problem with mulugim, there are times when even then the gimel lugim will just not cause any harm. And that's going to be very interesting. Some of the halachas here, beginning with Sif Chav Gimel, concern coloration and concern other liquids. So we're getting into the area of mikvahs that are being formed in all kinds of means, by all kinds of liquids, I guess we call them. Some of them will not do any harm, some of them will. So there are some surprises here also. And this basically follows the Mishnayos and Mikvois. Basically, the Chachamim did not passel gimel lugim of mayim she'ovim unless they're considered water. Let's begin with that. In other words, you have water that is 3 lugim, and their appearance is like water. That is when we say that the gimel lugim can, in certain situations, passel and mikvah was gimel lugim of mayim she'ovim. So here we really have 2 basic halachas in the first few halachas, and that is that a mikveh can become passel, even though it started off as a kosher mikveh, b'shinui mar'eh. If the color changes, it is possible that it will become passel, as we will see. And the gimel lugim that ordinarily could cause a mikveh to become passel will not make a mikveh passel unless they are 3 lugim of water with the appearance of water. So what that tells us is that if you have a situation where the water changed color, there would be a kula, there would be a leniency regarding the gimel lugim, that if they don't have that coloration, that appearance, then even though they're 3 lugim of mayim she'uvim, they in themselves will not passel the mikveh. So you have here really basically 2 ideas, 2 halachas. One is concerning the shinui mara of a mikveh, which we'll talk about, which can be a problem. The color changes. And a leniency in the discoloration of gimel lugim mayim she'uvim, that it loses its potency. I guess we can use that word. The gimel lugim are no longer been a passel because they don't look like water. They need to look like water to be water, to be considered gimel lugim of mayim she'uvim. So that's what the Mechaber says here. Ein gimel lugim poisling, in Sifchav Gimel, elem ken yiyu shel mayim, umar'ein mare mayim. Unless they are water, the gimel lugim have to be water, H2O. What about Coke? Is it water? So we're going to talk about that. So here we're saying, unless they are mayim, umar'ein mar'e mayim. They look like water. Leficha gimel lugim mayim shenafal esoichen yain. If you have 3 lugim of water, that wine fell into it, and they look like wine, that shenaflu lemikveh, that they fell into the mikveh, lo pasluhum, they did not passel it. Same thing in the following scenario, 3 lugim that are missing a little bit. A little bit of milk fell into the barely 3 lugim. And they completed the gimel lugim. And they fell into a mikveh that was chaser, that did not have the 40 se'ah. They did not passel it. So you have either wine in this example, which is going to change the color of the water to wine. These 3 lugim will no longer make a mikveh passel. Or you have a little bit less than 3 lugim of water that milk fell into it, and it completed to gimel lugim, and they fell into a mikveh lo pasluhum. Very interesting.
Why is there a difference? In the case of the wine, there's 3 lugim,
right?
And then you're adding 1 to it.
Right.
With the milk, there's less than 3.
Right.
The milk makes it, and it also changes.
No, not necessarily. We will see that there's 2 problems. There's a problem of shinui mar'eh. That's why the Mechaber says varei mar'eh mar'eh yain, and they look like wine. That's the big chiddush over here. That's where the difference really. That's where it makes a difference. That this water, if they don't look like water anymore,
right.
They don't look it in appearance, it's not water. But we will see that does not apply to paint necessarily. We'll see why. Milk. So here we're not necessarily talking about a change of color. We're talking about something completely different than water. The other problem. It's not water. Forget the color. You see? These are the 2 issues, the 2 possible issues.
I think it makes more thinkers. Thinks about it in exactly opposite.
Okay.
If you have something and you now top it off and make it something that's not water,
right?
Then that's going to possible because lugim of water.
Water, that's correct.
And even if you do have 3 lugim of water, and add something that's not water, such as wine, and it's the color, even though you did have 3 lug in the water, now that it's changed its color, even then it doesn't pass.
That's correct.
So if you turn the 2 cases around, then it makes sense to add the second case of you do have 3 lug in, but the color changes.
Okay. But you understand how you have 2 concepts here. Right.
But the milk will change the water. Enough milk will change.
Oh, yes. Enough milk, yeah.
Right. So if there were 3 milk in water,
Right.
instead of wine, milk falls. Enough milk to change the color.
Yeah, well, the color changes, it's going to be a problem of the discoloration. Yeah.
Well, the Mechaber wanted to give you a case where the reason that the water fails to puzzle the mikveh is because even though it was now something was added to make the mixture 3 lugin, but what was added was not water.
That's correct.
So he was looking for a case for that. So now he's got to add something to the water that's not water.
Yes.
And incidentally, whatever he will add will probably also look like water.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's not the point here, though. The point is there was there was less than 3 lugin of water, and
Right.
even though you added something that's not water, it remains less than 3 lugin of what? Not of the mixture, but of water.
Yes.
And in order to puzzle the mikveh, we need a full 3 lugin of not a mixture of something, but water. That's the point. It's a different point.
Right.
And then besides that, now let's say, okay, so now we do have 3 lugin of water, but now you could use the milk over again, as the case may be, to satisfy George. Because even if you do have 3 lugin of water, if you add milk and thereby change the coloration, but then you wouldn't be able to distinguish the cases. So use this wine instead.
Yeah, that's why we have 2 cases.
Yeah, 2 different mixtures.
Right. Okay? Because what did we say about the 3 lugin? The 3 lugin of Maim She'uvin will not be a problem if their color changes. Why?
Because it's not water.
Because the appearance now of wine is a discoloration of such that it is no longer considered water. In order for the Gimel Lugin to be puzzled, they have to be water and look like water. So now, what happens if the water of a mikveh changes and now has the appearance of wine because the wine fell into it?
Multiple color.
Sure.
You can paint or say.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
On Pesach, when we say the wine has to look like red.
Okay. Yes, it does. Yes.
Does this have to be red, or can it just be?
I'll mention that because there's one of the places who talks about white wine.
Okay.
So I'm going to get to that.
Right.
Yeah. I saw someone bring an idea of white wine. What will that do to it? But right now, all we need to know is that if the mikvah's color, the color changes. A nice rosé, like you said. It just doesn't look like water. It looks like wine.
Is it? Let me ask the next question. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we requiring when the wine goes into the 3 water?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we talking about a change in lugin, and therefore not water anymore?
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether it changes the color, because could he so diluted it before he saw it? Or are we requiring the whole mikveh to change?
Okay. Let's do it over again because I went out of order here. We're not talking about right now an entire mikveh that changed colors, because then the discoloration is a bigger problem. Okay. Right now we're still talking about the Gimel Lugin.
That's what I thought.
Yes, yeah. We're still talking about the Gimel Lugin. The Gimel Lugin of water that changes to wine does not puzzle the mikveh, right? Because it's not water. Whereas the Gemara asks the question, what's the difference between that and meitzeva? Why would paint be more of a problem than wine? More Marcus, I think. And the answer over there was...
Wait, why would paint be more of a problem
than wine?
In other words, the 3 lugin of Maim She'uvin would still retain the ability to puzzle.
That's
if
correct.
Instead of wine, you had poured paint into it.
Exactly.
So the paint is more of a problem.
More of a problem than wine.
But the 3 lugin remain a problem.
Yes, in the case of the paint.
So the paint does not remove the problem.
Right.
It doesn't cause
even though it discolors the water.
I understand that, but it doesn't cause any. What if it's red paint?
Makes no difference.
Okay.
Why? Because the Gemara says because it's called meitzeva. It still has the term water associated with it. Whereas wine is wine, it's not water. So that's the Gemara's question, that's the answer of it. Whereas the wine, it could be a diluted wine, it's not real wine, it's mozub, but it's wine. Okay, how about the level of change? How much, that's more or less what you were asking, how much would it have had to change? And I think that the Shach covers later on in Sifkot and Samach Vov, where he says, Afagav shelon ishtaneh lemareh yain. It doesn't have to change mamash to completely wine. Brings down the Shem Arrival, where he says over there that a mikveh becomes possible b'shinui mare, even though it has not changed completely to the color of wine. As long as it has changed slightly, it would make it possible. As long as it's no longer water, doesn't look like water, then it's possible. If that's the case, we learn from that the leniency. The kula also, that gimel lugim, mayim, that has some wine, it wouldn't have to be completely, have the complete appearance of yain to make the gimel lugim be ineffective in parceling the mikveh. Okay, so anyway, so the Mishnah Achronim writes that we can learn from this Raiva, from this Shach, that the leniency would also apply. The same rule would apply to the leniency of that if the gimel lugim do not have the appearance of water, even though it's just a little bit discolored, like you said, like a rosé wine, it would still not passel the mikveh. It wouldn't have to be a strong red wine. In the same way that later on in Sif Chafei we'll see that the discoloration of a mikveh is already no good if it comes about through wine. So we can use it or apply it to the leniency that if the three lugim do no longer look like water, they're not water. They're not considered gimel lugim of mayim shulgim. So what about white wine? Basically with white wine you don't have a shinui mareh. So what would you say? So I saw brought down, it all depends how much. The halacha is, we paskin that in order for one to say boyer priya gefen, undiluted wine that has water, it would have to be that you, at the very least 1 part of 6 of this mixture is wine. If you have less than that, then it's pretty much water. So if you have more than 1 part out of 6 wine mixing here, then in other words, that this has the din of boyer priya gefen, then it would be considered wine. It would not pass the mikveh. Interesting. If that's how you would determine it with the white wine, because you can't see the discoloration. Nonetheless, you do have a substantial amount of wine that you could say boyer priya gefen on.
Can you do?
Why would you want to do it?
For whatever reason, no more mayim kasher. Lots of mayim shul.
Well, with mayim we will see. With mayim shulvim, it's less of a problem to complete a mikveh than it is with wine. There are certain liquids that are not maile velo moyer, they're not mashlim.
But if you put a little wine into 3 little and keep pouring it in,
then you didn't accomplish anything. That's what I'm saying. The Mishnah says that there are certain liquids that lo maile velo moyer. In other words, it doesn't passel, but it doesn't complete it.
so this will not complete it.
So if you have an amount, remember, just have 1 lug of water, for example, it's not going to be a problem. It's 3 lug that's going to be a problem. Right. So with wine, you're not going to accomplish anything. You need the water.
You cannot finish.
You cannot finish up, right?
Okay.
Let's go on. So Sifchov Dalet is another example of all kinds of liquids that may or may not cause a problem to the mikveh. Make voshim or make shlokos the temed shelo hichmit. Pretty much quoting the Mishnah. Pickled water, I guess we can call it. Water that is used for pickling. So you have, it's no longer water, I mean, you've pickled stuff, vegetables in it. Mei shlokos, or the water which comes after cooking all kinds of vegetables. Temed shelo hichmit, or if you have a wine that is made from the residue of the grapes. It's an inferior quality wine. It hasn't fermented. So it's not a real wine. It's not the real original. It's just from the temed, from the residues. And it hasn't fermented. V'chen mei tseva, and the same thing with paint. These are poislim amikveh begimel lugim, because they're pretty much water. They're pretty much equivalent to water, these things. It's water. Same thing with colored water, which is paint, or the wine that was made from the residue. It's lo hichmitz. It hasn't yet fermented. It hasn't become strong enough. these are going to pass the mikveh b'gimel lugim. But kol shara mashkim, all other liquids, meiperos, juices, muryas, or brine, or the juice that comes out of the fish, temed mishehichmitz, or if it's the poor quality wine, the wine made from the residue that did become fermented, these will no longer pass the mikveh. Ena poisu mikveh achasa b'gimel lugim, v'gam ein mashlimim moisa. Neither will they complete it if you need just a little bit of it. Le'achshir, to make it kosher. Shim hoya vo lamet tes sayin. Imagine it had 39 sayin. V'nofal eseicha saw achas me'elu, and one saw fell of these into it. Ein mashlimim loisa, they will not complete it. Aval im yesh bo mem se'ah, but if it already has 40 se'ah, v'nofal eseicha saw achas me'elu, v'notal meseicha saw kosher. Here you have a very interesting scenario of nosan se'ah and notal se'ah, where you put in one and you take one out. You're doing an exchange. You start off with a mem se'ah ksherim, but you're replacing. So you're putting one se'ah in of these items, and you're taking out a se'ah from the mikveh. It's kosher, afilu also can add yutes pe'amim. You can do it up till 19 times. Because after a while, you're not going to have roiv. So long as you still have the roiv of the mayim ksherim, this is possible. After that, it's not possible. Now, before we go to the rest of the seif, there's a chiddush here. We're talking about mei kvoshim and mei shlokos. If you look up the halacha of what bracha to make on the mei shlokos and mei kvoshim, you will find in Birkas Hanin, you'll find that you make a boyer pri adama on it. So it's not really water. But here, for purposes of the gimel lugim she'uvim in a sense, gimel lugim, we consider them like water. Because it's still, in essence, like water. Temed shehichmitz, once the temed, the wine made from the residue, did become fermented, Rashi says that the reason why at this point it's not going to pass is because at this point it's already considered more like wine. What about beer? The Shach brings down, according to the Rambam, that beer is also considered like water, and it would passel in Gimel Lugim, even though it has its own name. So, I guess that would also apply to anything similar to beer, which, as I was saying before, even though it's called something else, some sort of drink, but essentially it's water, colored water, that it would also pass through the Gimel Lugim. Alright, so we started off saying here that this idea of nosan se'ov and notan se'ov, by slowly but surely replacing the water, would be okay up until a certain point. That's true only with these kind of juices. But the mayim she'uvim, the halacha is different. The mayim she'uvim shenoflu se'o lemem se'o. Let's say you have the 40 se'o and you have a se'o that fell into mem se'o ksherim. B'notam l'se'o, you took out a se'o acheres. V'nofal l'se'o se'o mayim ksherim. Afilu also kin ad oilam kosher. So you have mayim she'uvim that fell into a se'o that fell into mem se'o ksherim. Then you took out from it se'o acheres. V'nofal l'se'o se'o mayim ksherim again. So you're always going to complete it. Afilu also can add oilam, if you did it forever, it's kosher. So what's going on over here? So the Rashba writes that by the concept of nosan se'ov and notan se'ov with fruit juices, there's a concept called bitul beroiv. So the bitul beroiv you could have as long as you have roiv of the water. Otherwise, eventually at some point, it's choyze veneer. In other words, it's going to reawaken and it's going to become something other than water. And you can't really use them to make a kosher mikveh. You don't have mem se'ov ma'im ksherim. And for example, wine and meiperos cannot be mashlim the shir of mem se'ov. So what's the difference with mayim she'uvim? So I saw that the Rosh writes, I think the Rosh also writes, with mayim she'uvim it's different. The concept of nosan se'ov and notal se'ov can go on indefinitely because of something called nizroim. I think we spoke a little bit about that the mayim she'uvim are seeded. They're pretty much the same like the other waters, just that it's she'uvim. So these she'uvim are now seeded and somehow combined with the other waters to form one body of water. Meiperos, you cannot say in Israel, it's something completely different. And he brings down the Shem Rabbeinu Tam that they were machmer meiperos, since meiperos are not really chozel etvila, you cannot really immerse yourself in them. Anyway, according to the Rambam, the Ravid, even with mayim she'uvim, I think they say it would only be kosher until up to the roiv. But we hold, as you saw from the Mechaber, that it could go on indefinitely. This concept of nosan se'o, v'nota se'o. Once you started off with 40 se'o, mayim shirim, then you can always, one by one, replace it. As long as you replace it with mayim shirim, you have the 40 se'o. And this is, by the way, important. This halacha is important because it is relevant to how mikvois are cleansed and filtered and replaced.
So you take out shirim,
right,
and you use it. Assuming you're not using a bucket, you figure out.
Yeah, sure.
So you can do this until an indefinite number of mikvaot from the original 40 saw, theoretically.
Yeah, because it's kosher, really. Yeah.
It
starts off as kosher. Yeah, sure, exactly. Yeah, and then you can continuously make a new mikveh as long as you start off with the right amount. But that's the question here amongst the Rishonim: could this go on indefinitely or not? As far as this mikveh is concerned, right here, at some point you may lose the roiv. If it's all about roiv, does it make a difference with mayim shuvim or not? Apparently, some say it does. Rosh says no, it doesn't. It will not make a difference because you started off with the right amount. As long as we're talking about water, we don't have the problem, according to the Rosh. Talking about something else, then up to 19 times you can do so. All right, next seif. Mei tseva yesh lam din mayim lifsul asamik ve'achoser begimol lugin. So paint has the din of water. Paint is called water, considered water, to pass on the mikveh that is missing with 3 lugin. Because it's water. It's colored water, but it's water. Even though their appearance is different than water, they're still called water, their status is water, and therefore, if that's what you have in the 3 lugin, it's possible. It would pass on the mikveh. But if you have a mikveh that is kosher to begin with, 40 se'ah, even though paint fell in and changed somewhat the color, here you have the opposite type of leniency, where the discoloration here will not do any harm, because if we call it water, then water after 40 se'ah makes no difference if it's coming out of the faucet, makes no difference if it's paint. The discoloration per se will not cause any problem, as long as this is called water, and paint is called water, and you have 40 se'ah. So the discoloration, according to some poskim, by the way, if what you have, it makes a difference if the paint has some of the material that goes into making the paint, because then you have mamoshes, you have actually something there other than just color. Because if all it is the color, but the material, I mean, the liquid is water, right? If the liquid is water, but all it is a dye or something that colors the water, then it's still water. So according to some, it all depends what is in there. But if all it is a coloration of water, then we don't have to be concerned with that in a mikveh. Once you have the 40 se'ah, that is. Yeah.
And it goes into this thing.
Right.
Can we say that it changes the 3 lugin?
Exactly. Because then it may be something else other than water. According to some. Yeah. But for what we need to know right now is just plain old paint will not do any harm. I mean, it's obviously going to do some harm that you may not want to dip into it, but the mikveh is still a kosher mikveh if you started off with 40 se'ah. Whereas the other way around, in 3 lugin, because it's still water, it's considered water to make the 3 lugin possible. So a mikveh shalom, even though you have shenoflu bo min meitzeva v'shinu marov, lo nifso, even though they change the color, it's not possible.
Now, if you were able to remove its added,
if what?
to remove exactly the added,
right,
or reduce looking,
right.
what the status of the one?
No, we said that once you've made the mikveh possible, and not have the 40 se'ah, then the nisharim ben pisula, they remain in their psul. The entire thing is possible right now.
You moved whatever it was that you had.
Yes, you would have to remove the whole thing. The whole thing is gone. You would have to have a complete brand new mikveh filled in. So here, just a change of color will not render it possible. You rinsed, washed kelim, and the color changed the mikveh. Or you put some dye or oil in the food into the waters, when yishtane marav, somehow the water, the color changed. Lo nifsal, in this situation, the mikveh did not become possible. Aval, im nofal esoicha yain or mohel, if what you have falling into the mikveh is wine. Now, this is the example where you have a kosher mikveh, or mohel. What's mohel? Amayim hayotzim me'azeisim. The juices that come out of the olive. Betchilas te'inas hazeisim, when you v'yesh b'hem tzachsuchei shema, when you first press the olives, and you have a little bit of oil in there. That's called the mohel. The waters that are coming out, the juice that's coming out of the zeisim. If you have the wine or the mohel falling into the mikveh, v'shinu marav, and they change the color, mikemot shehoyer, from what it was before, nifsal, it becomes possible. In this case, it becomes possible. Obviously, if you still have 40 se'ah somewhere in that large body of water of mayim ksherim that look like water, then you can dip there. Here we're just talking about that the whole thing changed colors. As long as a little bit, we said before, the Shach brings down, as long as a little bit of it changed in colors, this would make it possible. So here you have two opposites here. You have sometimes wine is okay with the gimelugim, but here it's not okay if there's a hole. And paint, in the gimelugim, it's a problem because it's water. But falling into a mikveh, because it's water, it helps that it doesn't ruin the mikveh. So here, what we're talking about with the wine, what is the problem with wine? Wine is a problem only if it changed the color. Shinu marav, just the fact that you have some wine falling in is not a problem. But at the very least, you can do the following. The Mechaber says, not all is lost, because you did start off with 40 se'ot mayim ksherim, right? Just that right now, you can't dip into it. What should you do? Keitzad yaseh, what should you do? Imhu choser, if it doesn't have the 40 se'ah. Now, yamtin lo ad sheyerdu gshamim v'yitmale. Wait until it fills up with rain, fills up again. V'yachzuru marov lemare mayim. It will go back to looking like water. V'im yesh bo mem se'ah, she'eno nifsal, oid b'she'iva. If it already had 40 se'ah, which no longer can become possible through mayim shuvim, just open up the faucet, or bring buckets. Yimale be'kosef, go bring buckets on your shoulder. Until you can bring back and restore the color of the water to what it was. So if you start off with mem se'ah, okay, so temporarily some barrels of wine spilled in and somehow looks like wine. Well, you can't use it. But you can restore it. Just if it has mem se'ah, you can restore it by adding faucet water, bucket water, mayim shuvim. If not, you have to wait till the next rain. But it will go back to becoming a kosher mikveh. So
you're saying then that the entire mikveh is possible to make?
Yeah, if it's from wine. All right. What happens the next thing? Hoyu bo mem se'ah. The nafal esoicha yain. You have 40 se'ah and wine from the nishtane maro shel chetzyoy. Half of it changed. Im ein bo mare mayim mem se'ah. But if it does not have at least one section, one side of 40 se'ah mayim ksherim, then it's possible. Before we go on, just want to tell you that there's a machlokes rishonim if this shinui mar'eh, the change of color, is min Torah or not. Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva learn that this is min Torah. The Raavad, I think, is one of the only ones that says shinui mar'eh is possible min Rabbanan. And it's a gzeira that you should not come to dip fruit juice in something else. So we see that in this case, the shinui mar'eh is a problem more with wine and mohan, but not with paint. As long as it's a paint that does not have any mamoshes. As we said, if it had mamoshes, if it had some substance, then it possibly would passel. And same thing with dye, the food color and all those things that may have changed the color of the mikveh, they don't passel. They are pretty much the same like paint. Okay, let's go on. Sif Chav Zayin. Mikveh shenishtanu mare meimav. Let's say the water changed color. Machmas atzmoi. But it was not because of something external that spilled or was poured into it. V'lo nafal bo davar. Nothing fell in there. It just somehow the color changed with time. And is it kosher? It continues. So in order to make it possible, it would have to be something external, not on its own. Sif Chof Ches. En shinui mar'e poisel elo b'mei geshomim shenasu mikveh. In dealing with the psul of shinui mar'e, we're only talking about such a psul that occurs with mei geshomim, rainwater. Shenasu mikveh, that became a mikveh. Abal mayon eino nefsal v'shinui mar'e. A mayon cannot become possible through shinui. Not only that, the Chaver adds, el afilu ha-mikveh shenifsal, somehow you have a mikveh that became possible. Im him shif elov mei mayin, if you somehow opened up, allowed a mayin to run into the mikveh, ha-mayin metar oiso. Afilu lo chozer le-mayin. The mayin will immediately metar this mikveh, even though the colors were not restored to the plain color of water. That's the koach of a mayin. That not only in itself does not become possible, it can also be metar. You repair a mikveh, even if the color didn't go back to being the color of water. Chavtes. Noflu lo shloisha lugin. Here we have various halachas in Chavtes. Let's say you have 3 lugin falling in of wine. Noflu lo shloisha lugin yain. Ki'ilu lo nofal. So here, whether you have 40 sa'ol or don't have 40 sa'ol, what he's saying is that this 3 lugin of yain, not mayim, don't make a difference. Ke'ilu lo nofal, and you're allowed to be toivel in it. In other words, once you have the 40 sa'ol. Noflu lo shloisha lugin yain ki'ilu lo nofal, ben b'mokom hayain, ben b'mokom hamayim. You're allowed to dip, whether it's in the spot where the wine is or where the spot of where the water is. So, the case of shloisha lugin where this could be a problem would be if the mikveh is choser. So even in that situation, what do we say? Lo maile, but lo moirid. It does not cause any problems. Hoyo shouv, if the mikveh was of mayim she'uvim, vehishiko, and because there's wine in there, and you made hashaka, you brought in water from another source, kosher source, so Ishik b'mokom hayayin ze v'ze lo tiher. If you did the hashaka where the wine was, you were not metaher. Hishik b'mokom hamayim. If you did hashaka where the water is, let's say it's a big mikveh, a little bit of water, a big body of water, and you did the hashaka where the water is, mokom hamayim toher, mokom hayayin lo toher. The place of the water would be toher, the place of the wine would not be toher. The last detail here is in the Ramah. Mikveh choser shenofal sham yayin v'nishtane mar'ehu. Let's say you have a mikveh that is choser, that wine fell in, and the color changed. The nofal sham gimel lugim mayim she'uvim, and then 3 lugim mayim fell in. So this is an interesting scenario, because remember, even though the gimel lugim of wine are not a problem, in the Ramah's example, you have a mikveh choser, shenofal sham yain, wine fell in, regardless of the amount. V'nishtane mar'ehu, the color changed. V'nofal sham gimel lugim mayim she'uvim einon poislim. So because the color changed of this mikveh chaser, or ordinarily it would be a problem if it's a kosher mikveh, it's not a kosher mikveh yet, it's a chaser. The color changed of the mikveh while it's a chaser. The wine is not maile v'lo moirid. Now, 3 lugim of mayim she'uvim coming in and falling into this mikveh does not possible, because it's not falling into water, it's falling into yain. Interesting chiddush, no? So mikveh choser shenofal sham yain v'nishtane mar'eo, the color changed, v'nofal sham gimel lugim mayim she'uvim einam poison, they would not possible it. Ukshechazar v'hishlim ha'mikveh b'mayim she'edim, once it goes back and completes the mikveh with mayim she'edim, v'chazar le'mare mayim, and of course the color is restored and it's kosher. And that is what we learned also in the Mishnah, that if you have 40 sa'ol mayim she'edim and the color changed, all you got to do is restore it. So in this case, the wine was an advantage to this mikveh. As a result of the discoloration of this mikveh to a color of wine, while it's still chaser, means that the gimel lugim had no effect on it. So here we're not talking about gimel lugim of wine, we're talking about gimel lugim of mayim she'uvim, that ordinarily would be a problem for mikveh chaser. Here they're not poislim. Therefore, if later on the mikveh was restored, it was with mayim she'er, and the appearance of the water went back to looking like water, the mikveh would be kosher mikveh. All right, I think we'll stop here. We're going to be going into snow and ice, and all kinds of other situations that involve a form of water in a different form, yeah, and that sometimes it's necessary when there's no rainwater.
Why?
To make a mikveh. Yeah.
What is the distinction between one yes and one no?
Beer is water. Beer is considered water.
Today's, so then we do about today. The wine was wrong.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's why I brought the formula of 1/6. Yeah, that would depend on if you would make a boyer geffen or not. Is this wine or not? And obviously, some wines are so diluted already that it's a question whether you say shahakal on it or. You have to know that if you're going to make kiddush on it, or arba koises, Pesach, yeah. But that's the question. I mean, that would be the calculation that you would use, the formula to consider a wine or not.
Is there any commandment to make sure?
Well, according to some, yain levushal, if it's pasteurized, you can't say boyer geffen. Most don't hold with that. We pretty much hold that you say boyer geffen, just that some are mehader not to use it for kiddush. But the sweet wines may have
some of them are very well, like sugar.
Yeah, regular wines are fine, but there may be some that the way they're made, that there's barely any wine or any juice there. They may be questionable. I think most of them don't have.